Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging podcast discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Caccera, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Caccera.
Welcome in, Joe Caccera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you for those that are continuing to watch us on the live feed on Facebook. We appreciate that very much. Just to stay consistent, we try to do the shows on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, right around 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. However, sometimes we do extend that. We're doing our second show today with Jack Russo, and I'll get him on in just a second. Just a reminder, if you want more information, you can go to RERl-1535-When. Love that you're watching the feed, the live feed. Love that we're making the best use of social media as we can. We'll continue to do that. However, the most important thing is you download the podcast. That way you could watch the show, listen to the show, I should say, at your convenience when you can, and you could even go back and listen to the past shows as well. Most of you know, if you've been following the show, that Jack Russo and I have been doing a series now, I think it's been several weeks, and this is either 17 or 18, I believe. Today is going to be when a crisis is a threat, really it comes to a threat of litigation. Jack's going to talk about that, so let me invite my friend Jack Russo in. Jack, good to have you. We were supposed to be in studio, but just quite didn't happen that way, but got you on the phone.
Right, yeah. You know, what happens is you're just trying to go less than 20 miles from our offices in Palo Alto down to your offices in Los Gatos. Maybe it's 28 miles. We live in a world that is so complicated. You plug into your little car GPS and it says you can get there in like 36 minutes. So you leave in time to get there. And of course, the police officer decides at the end of the month ticket thing that might be happening. I hate to say that that's what happens, but there is kind of a quota system.
Yep.
And then you get pulled over. And what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
You know, you got to just comply with the law and accept the consequences of it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Well, we're glad you're safe. Unfortunately, you got the ticket. Too bad about that. We're glad you're safe, and thanks for taking some time.
It is kind of an appropriate crisis moment because when flashing lights are behind you, it is a signal that maybe you have done something wrong. And of course, I don't think I did, given that the way things work in Silicon Valley is 55 doesn't really mean 55, and 65 doesn't really mean 65. In the way we operate here, we move a lot faster, but on a given day and a given week, it may or may not be the case. So it's just a good example to start the show off with.
Yeah, it is.
In some ways.
Well, before we jump into the topic, when the crisis is the threat of litigation, real quickly, if you could, Jack, for our listeners that may not know you, we've been doing this for several months. Hopefully, we'll continue to do the show. It's been a real exciting series and very informative. If you could give us just a minute or so about yourself, the background of the firm, your areas of expertise, and we'll jump in.
Sure. Computer Law Group in downtown Palo Alto. I've been in practice for almost 40 years. The firm has been in practice for more than 35. I've been someone who has watched Silicon Valley grow from the early stage computing systems that have been out there to where we are today, where there's super advanced systems. And we've been practicing in this area and have the computerlaw.com domain name. So we've had a website almost from the beginning of the internet, maybe even arguably from the beginning. And so you can find us there, computerlaw.com. I'm Jack at computerlaw.com, or Jay Russo, that's JRUSSO at computerlaw.com. And we're in downtown Palo Alto. I'm the managing partner. The phone number there is 650-327-9800. And we help startups from really beginning through growth, through their eventual typical exits. And we try to do that in the most efficient and cost-effective way. And we aim to remain a boutique firm with that goal in mind. And we're happy to do this show because we've had many people thank us. They go to now the Google site and leave commentary about how they appreciate getting the information, and they appreciate that there is no charge for this great service that you do in providing people with insights about not only their real estate, but often about businesses that they start sometimes using the equity in their real estate.
Right. No, it's a good point. And I think that, I started this show and I really built my business, Jack, on education and information. And my thought has always been, I know you have to be careful if some people take advantage, but overall, I think the general consumer, they appreciate the education and information. Typically, people don't want to be sold or feel like they're being sold on something. But I think if we could connect with them on a level of, this is some information, we're going to share some valuable information. And, if there's a time that you need to use our services, we hope that, they think of us, right?
Right, and what's nice about the breadth of what you're doing is it ties together, because I listen to your show and others around me listen to your show, and the one that you just did that had to do with these creative financing techniques that guys at Merrill Lynch pulled together, and gals at Merrill Lynch. I mean, the goal is sometimes people have a unique portfolio, and they really need a custom solution to all their assets. Sometimes their assets are not in the most liquid things out there, but they want to start a business and they need some cash to get the business started, and they need to have money to buy inventory, and they need to do a lot of things. And they've got the equity there, but they've got to draw it down in a smart way. So putting those dots together through your show to say, well, now I can see how I can do this without going out to angel investors or venture capital or any outside source, but by using the existing leverage that they have in some smart way. So these dots do all connect together, and it is kind of a course in how to become successful using your own talents.
Yeah, good
and
point.
That's really what starting something is all about, and what this series is all about. In some ways, what your show is all about.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. So we are, speaking of the series, Jack, I think this is 17 or 18, but we've been rolling along, getting a lot of good feedback. So this one, when crisis, as it comes to a threat of litigation, I guess, right? You're going to talk a little bit today. We talked about the crisis, and there's certain levels of it. And now when it gets to the point where there's a threat of litigation, huh?
Right. And I want to try to tie together the 16 or 17 shows that we've done, because you can do the best planning and you can really engage in the best practices, and you can do everything as right as you can. And then just something happens, and all of a sudden you're at the other end of a civil litigation. We'll leave for a separate topic, criminal litigation or criminal indictments. The stuff that we see happening to people like the startup founders at Theranos, the blood company, for which there's that famous book. That's a whole nother topic that maybe we'll take up, but that's really super serious stuff. Now we're just dealing with civil litigation, which is somebody decides that you have violated their rights, or we'll take the flip side too, which is someone's violating your company's rights, and you have to decide, should I or should I not litigate, and are there other alternatives? So the typical case I give, which is a serious one, it's the simplest one to think about, is you picked a good name for your company, you registered all the domains, you got the intent to use trademark and or service mark rights. Maybe you actually went into business. In fact, typically you would have. And you've got what's called the actual use trademark rights as well. And maybe those have even gotten to a place where you're starting to make sales and you're starting to succeed. And all of a sudden, and this is a case that just came in this week, and we'll leave the names out because it's a pretty common case. And all of a sudden, a bigger company decides to essentially adopt a name that's almost identical and that is causing you and your customers and your channel confusion. So right now, you've got Bundle Select, and you're doing great guns with that. But imagine someone comes out with Bundled Select as a name. And you say, wait a minute, I've got a trademark registration on Bundled Select. I've got the domain names. You may even have Bundled Select, but they decide, well, they're going to use something like bundleselect.net or something, or bundleselect.it, and they have used that website. And you say, wait a minute, I've been in business now for blankety blank months or years, and you're causing confusion, and you're running ads and doing stuff that's violating my rights. Now, what do? It's not so simple as you can press a button and they'll just go away. And they may decide to say something like, look, we think that we've got a different channel than you do, or we think we're doing something different than you are. And you're looking at, hey, I've spent sometimes several million, certainly significant time, and you think the enterprise value is worth a lot.
Right.
And the name is now causing confusion. Or the flip side case happens, which is someone comes out of the woodwork saying, hey, wait a minute, I actually had that name before you. You just didn't do a good enough search. These things happen. It's crazy.
Wow.
And you can do a lot of planning and a lot of protective steps and still sort of hit a landmine.
Mm-hmm.
And the question then becomes, how do you try to strategize with the right attorney and the right advisor about how do we solve this problem? Because it is a real crisis. And it is causing sometimes people call up looking for the other guy. Sometimes they call up and say, are you the one that I can place an order with for something completely different than what you sell? And you're trying to figure out, this is taking a lot of my time. It's causing a lot of disruption. It's causing a lot of confusion. And there really is a serious public interest that's being violated, which is the public doesn't like getting redirected or confused either.
Right.
And this is a big area that people often don't realize that they can trip a switch on and cause themselves litigation or end up having to bring litigation. And the question becomes, how do you start to think about that particular type of crisis? Because there's no real insurance that you could absolutely get and that would give you absolute coverage. This is a risk of doing business that exists every day of the week.
Right.
And it does happen in lots of different contexts. The one that I most remember from many years ago when I was at my previous law firm, Fenwick & West, is that we represented Apple Computer, and this is a public known dispute, but many years ago, the Beatles had the Apple record label for the Apple vinyl album.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yeah.
And you may remember it had an Apple.
Right.
It had an Apple as well in the middle of the album. And in fact, for those of you that are collectors, and I'm a collector of vinyls because I do think the quality of the sound is great. Unfortunately, they're not very easy to move and they're pretty heavy. If you put 50 of them together, you've got a kettle ball that you can lift up. I mean, it's that heavy. But the Apple reached an agreement with the Apple label, the Beatles label, that Apple would not go into music using the Apple brand. At least they wouldn't go into long-playing vinyl record type music. And that if they did go into it, then the parties would have to get together and work out some type of deal. And of course, Apple did eventually go into music.
Yeah.
So it's a dynamic area where even if you are, as the Beatles were, the prior owner of the Apple vinyl and then eventually really the Apple label for all delivery of the Beatles music, the Apple company itself decided to get into music.
Yeah.
And in fact, as it turned out, the Apple iPod and then now the iPhone became even a bigger, more important product, as did the Apple Store for delivery of music, the iTunes Store. So the Apple name was so associated that they had to go back to the table, and there was public litigation by the Beatles, really by the Apple, the holding company that owned the Apple brand, against Apple Computer saying, you know, you broke the deal that you made. We agreed to coexist, but you were supposed to stay out of music. And now you're in music and you're not paying us a royalty. And you're violating our rights and you're causing confusion. And, you know, at the end of the day, Apple did have to make a new compensatory deal.
Wow.
And this is all public information. But it is a moving target because there are people that do expand their brands in directions that you would not anticipate.
Wow.
You know, origination of Apple, no one was thinking computers would play music. Computers weren't powerful enough. The hard disks were too small.
Right.
People weren't thinking that music would ever be recorded this way. People were thinking music would always be delivered on some tangible deliverable.
And that's a great example, Jack. And I guess as you're talking about this, what kind of resonates is that, you know, oftentimes you hear this story all the time, right? Someone will start a business and they'll think it's going to go, you know, in one direction, and all of a sudden it starts in another direction. And so with that said, if you give a little of advice here along the way on this topic, would you say that when you're starting a business, maybe as the little insurance policy, just try to take as many domains kind of around any kind of models or, things that might evolve in technology or systems or processes, and just, I know that's one thing you could do, but are there any other things you could do to potentially kind of protect yourself as best as possible on something like that?
Yeah, the practical advice is the trademark law, the Federal Lanham Act trademark law, allows you to file what's called an intent to use trademark registration. So you don't have to actually use it. You can actually stake it out. And what people do if they have, budget, which obviously this is a small budget compared to a litigation budget.
Right.
But if you have budget, you stake out as many variations and classes of the name.
I see.
So, for example, Apple could have done, in today's world, back then this didn't exist, but in today's world, if Apple were just starting, Apple would say, well, we want to intend to use the Apple brand for computers, for phones, for delivery of music, for musical items. They would stake out all that, and they would hope that any conflict would be identified in.
Did we lose them? We're going to, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're live here with Jack, and we're going to come back and continue the show. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Again, stick with us. We'll be back with you in just a minute.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com.
Getting ready to buy or sell a home in 30, 60, or 90 days? Then check out BundleSelect.com to find out how you could save 20% or more on your entire transaction. Save on real estate, lending, and title. With BundleSelect.com, technology and a personal concierge are at your service to save you time and money. Bundle Select's hand-picked team of experts will compete for your business, so you'll save thousands of dollars by bundling all of these services. BundleSelect.com gives you all the control, including using your own realtor. I'm Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live, and I have been on the radio educating consumers for years. By bundling services like real estate, lending, and title, you could save tens of thousands of dollars. Act now, and this new model could save you money on your move, lower your interest rate, or cover your closing costs. Visit BundleSelect.com. That's BundleSelect.com.
The estimated minimum savings are based on a comparison with the national average. Individual results may vary, and the estimated savings are not guaranteed. Bundle Select Inc. is a licensed real estate broker. California Bureau of Real Estate Broker license number 004-66902.
Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's topic or guests, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for today's edition of Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Kuchera.
Sorry for the interruption here.
No problem.
We will start with segment 2 here. We have Jack Russo on the line as we're doing our series, continuing that series. Today's topic is when the crisis is the threat of litigation. Right before we get cut off, Jack was talking a little bit of giving some examples about some of the scenarios, and he used Apple as an example. So we'll continue from here. Again, with the show, if you're just checking in, Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. We have Jack Russo on the line. He's the managing partner at the Computer Law Group in Palo Alto. We're with our ongoing series of starting something new in Silicon Valley. And so jump back in, Jack, and try to finish where you left off there.
Right, and I apologize if I caused that. Hopefully it was
no, it wasn't
certainly unintentional, and the cop didn't pull me over again just to tie the story together. But the short answer is that nowadays the Federal Lanham Act, the Federal Lanham Trademark Act, gives people the advantage of what's called an intent to use trademark registration or service mark registration, which means you can file and designate the word or term or phrase or other indicia that you want to have protected as your trademark or service mark in advance by filing this intent to use filing. You pay a fee, you file a bunch of paperwork. It can be done electronically. And then if there's not a conflict and there's publication that allows the world to know that you're intending to use this, then you have this trademark right with less likelihood of collision, but keep in mind that there's always a risk that people are changing their businesses to adapt to new desires and wants and needs of consumers. I mean, years ago, we didn't carry around cell phones, but today most people can't live without one or two or three. And it seems like the world is becoming more mobile, and people want the convenience of having these electronics in their pocket. I see some people that have several and have backup batteries, and I've even seen now some people with backpacks that have solar chargers on them. That was unheard of years ago. It was unheard of to carry batteries around that are rechargeable batteries because that technology didn't really exist and wasn't commercially feasible at the levels that it is now at the consumer level. And, you know, I saw a startup this afternoon that is maybe going to be a game changer in an area of a wearable. I won't say exactly what they're doing, but I can imagine a future where their particular wearable device will be a common device in use. The latest numbers I've seen, they were published in association with this Facebook recent quarterly report that just came out, and it was, you know, interesting set of numbers by Facebook, but it was, some of the analysts were saying, you know, Facebook might have a saturation problem. That is that there's only 8 billion, there's like 8 or 9 billion people on Earth. And then they start subtracting. Look, the people in China are using Facebook. They're using the Chinese version. They start subtracting. They say, you know, there's only then about 3 or 4 million people that are actual potential users, billion people. For, let's call it 5 billion, you know, half the world that's on the internet. They said Facebook already has about 3.5 to 4 billion of them.
Interesting.
They use Facebook. And so their point is, look, you know, there's not a lot more people that are going to adopt into Facebook. They've saturated the world with Facebook. And even though they're making a lot of money, the investors are upset that the company is not growing as fast. Of course it can't grow as fast. It's already a monopoly. It's already got the market. So what are you complaining about? They're saying, well, you know, it's like where they go for growth, to another planet. You know, it's almost like the growth is limited by the limited number of eyeballs that exist on the planet that are connected to some device that's connected to the internet. So the point that I'm making is businesses change, and part of what you as an entrepreneur do, and this is the important lesson, you've got to be wary of, well, what is the adaptation you yourself must make? Because I've seen scenarios, and I'm going to say something that's going to sound sort of off the chart, because you've developed and created all of these intellectual property rights, and you've done all the right thing up to this point. You've invested all this time and money. And there are scenarios where the better advice may be, maybe you have to sell your intellectual property to this other party that's bigger than you because the fight is too expensive. And I'm not here to advocate that that's always the right outcome, but I've seen and I've been in cases where bigger companies who came in later and arguably should not be violating your rights will say, look, move over, we're going to buy this from you or mow you down. And sometimes the better counseling is not to go to war, but rather to negotiate a deal and take the compensation that they pay and then come up with something new. And it sounds crazy, and it sounds like, hey, that's not the way the system should work. Your intellectual property rights are your intellectual property rights. But sometimes that is the outcome or the advice that you have to give, and then it's just a negotiation of what's a fair price. As a result, there are counter cases I should mention that are worth looking at when this situation comes up. There was a case involving a tire company where a smaller company had adopted the name Big O, like B-I-G, space capital. And then there was like I forget whether it was Goodyear or Goodrich or one of the bigger companies came in with essentially a very similar, if not identical brand. And the Big O company, the original Big O company, even though it was a smaller company, said, man, we're going to go to trial on this. And they won in a big way. And the judge there said, look, you can't just mow down a smaller competitor by deciding to take their brand and then forcing them into a deal that they don't want to make. And so there are famous cases where smaller, the Davids of the world do force the Goliaths to face a jury. And with the right judge and the right jury and the right outcome, you can end up getting some justice. But oftentimes bigger companies will say, look, we need this brand. We absolutely have to have this brand. And a lot of it becomes a negotiation about, okay, well, maybe it's worth a lot more to you than it is to me. And I'll negotiate a deal, and a negotiation happens.
Right.
But that's still a crisis because you've got to find help.
Sure.
Typically find a lawyer, typically on some hybrid or contingent fee basis, who's willing to partner up with you, because it's very hard to get that kind of negotiation done without being capable of having the big O type fight.
Right. Yeah.
It says, well, wait a minute, you can't do this to me. I can take you in front of a jury. And that's where the American system is a bit better of an equalizer than if you have this problem in Europe. If you have this problem in Europe, and I've had clients that have had this type of problem in Europe, the lawyers in Europe are very, very reluctant to do anything other than hourly cash fees. They work with substantial retainers, and it's very expensive to engage in litigation in England or Germany or anywhere in the EU for that matter.
Yeah.
And the courts there are very slow and, worse than even the American courts. No disrespect for them, but they are literally backlogged as badly. And the lawyers expect to be paid handsomely for bringing cases or defending cases.
Yeah. Jack, we got a couple minutes left, but before we kind of summarize, I'll have you summarize kind of your view on the crisis and litigation, the threat of it. But remind everyone, if someone's trying to reach you or your firm, obviously you work with startups, any other areas of expertise, if someone's out there and they need any kind of legal representation, just to remind everyone what you guys do and then how they might be able to reach you.
Sure. We do all forms of intellectual property litigation, trademark litigation, trade secret litigation, copyright litigation, patent litigation, internet domain name and internet e-commerce litigation, really all business litigation. We don't do personal injury cases. We don't do divorce cases. We don't do bankruptcy cases, but we do really the full gamut of business litigation, and we do the startup strategic planning and strategic intellectual property planning with the goal of avoiding litigation and with the goal of trying to anticipate and manage around some of these problems. And we're in Palo Alto, near the Apple Store, downtown Palo Alto, and it's 650-327-9800 is the phone line. The website is computerlaw.com, and I'm Jack Russo, or Jack at computerlaw, or jrusso at computerlaw.com.
Great. Within the next minute or so, give us kind of a summary and a wrap-up as we exit the show here. What kind of a lasting impression on someone on this, the crisis and the threat of litigation?
Right. So I'll say three things in particular. One, you have to imagine that you're going on a journey. I sort of think back to the day of Christopher Columbus, because I was born on Columbus Day, October 12th. My mom likes to say, we were going to call you Christopher, but your dad had too big of an ego, so he wanted the firstborn male. He wanted his name on you. She tells me the story. She's still alive at 88. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and my dad agrees, that's the way it should be in an Italian family. But the point is that you're like going out with a Nina, what the name of those three boats were. I remember this from Catholic grade school. You're going out on this journey. One of them was the Santa Maria. There were three boats that were going on this journey to find the new world. Starting a business is a little bit like that. It's a big experiment in what works and what doesn't work, and what adaptation has to happen as weather hits, as adversity hits, as enemies start to attack. Stuff happens, and crises will happen, and litigation and civil litigation is inevitably one type of crisis. And the one example we gave today is the typical trademark or trade name or service mark conflict. And the three things I'll say is, don't overthink it. If you are in that situation and the red lights are on, you've gotten a demand letter, or you've gotten a draft of a lawsuit, or you've gotten a lawsuit yourself, find a good lawyer, go and see him or her. Typically, most lawyers won't charge for the first meeting. Get some preliminary advice about what you're facing. don't destroy any of the evidence, preserve everything. That's the second point I'll make. Don't do anything stupid. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, let's just get rid of this, get rid of that. No, don't do any of that. And then number 3 is sit down and think through what is plan B if you cannot get a negotiated outcome. What are the other outcomes that are possible? And how do you think through? Because typically you can work around almost every type of civil litigation crisis that emerges. You can typically find the solution, and most people, most of the time, would rather find the solution, whether it's negotiated or mediated or arbitrated. Most people don't want to suffer the expense or the time consumption of litigation. If they have to, they will, but it's really usually a last resort. And usually there are other courses that should be looked at first, and most good lawyers, even good trial lawyers, even great trial lawyers like Lincoln would say, find peace first, see if you can get your client to a peaceful outcome. They will remember you. Don't worry about the business activity or your office being idle. Your goodwill and your reputation will make up totally for it. There's a famous quote from Lincoln. I'll find it and send it to you, and you can post it on the website. But in general, get that advice, listen to it, give some thought to alternatives, and usually there's an alternative that will work, and the only question is how to best implement it.
Very good.
So with that in mind, I want to thank you, Joe, for letting me call in. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it down. Hopefully I could buy you lunch or coffee or something and make up for this in the next go-round.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I look forward to reconnecting next week, and thanks again for calling in, Jack. It's always informative, a lot of great information, and be sure to drive safe. You don't need another ticket.
All right. Yeah, I understand now why Uber is so popular. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Sure, bye-bye.
Jack Russo with Computer Law Group. Always great to have Jack on. And again, it's a continued series, starting something new in Silicon Valley. We'll continue to do that. We try to do that every week if we can, so be sure to tune in. If we need to change the schedule, always check the website at RERl-1535.When. This is Joe Kuchera with Real Estate Radio Live. Thanks again for all those tuning in, and sorry for the little disruption. We'll be back with you in a couple of days. Take care.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Subscribe to our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com.